This presentation is about some questions that have been pre-submitted and just some tips generally for applying. So the first part to make you aware of as such is about university selling tactics. Okay, so it is important to acknowledge, they are commercial, they are businesses, they do need students' money. So you may be offered a reduced grade offer if you put a university as your firm choice, or you may get some financial benefit or gift like a laptop, for example. So if you want to go there, I would say that's an added bonus. So that's really, really great. You want to go to this place and they're giving you actually something for it as well. But I'd always say, look at the merits of the institution, look at the course. Is it the right place for you? You are the customer, so ask any questions. If the answer they give is not good enough, fine, maybe look at another institution because, as much as it can annoy some people, the customer is always right in that sort of sense. So yeah, make sure you ask any questions you have of them. They shouldn't be uncomfortable about answering them. And just don't prioritize, I really want this ensuite or a laptop or whatever. I just say focus on making sure it's the right place for you. That's the most important thing. Quick note as well, which is unconditional, well, they're actually called unconditional conditional offers. It's a bit of a weird title, but basically means that, as it says there, until September 2021, institutions are banned from giving unconditional offers only if you put them as your firm choice. It's to discourage that, because that was a practice that a lot of universities were using, particularly ones who felt they could benefit from that, where they do that. It's just another selling tactic. So I would say just be a bit savvy on those sort of things. So in terms of courses, so just looking at some sort of differences. So history, of course, is more general than history and politics. So in terms of, this is, by the way, in response to, is there any benefits or advantages to a more focused course compared to a general one? I'd say with history and politics, it says there, the modules, in history and politics, you can usually choose all the modules that are on the history paper, but it doesn't really impact your employment prospects. The only difference is that, of course, you'll be studying more things if it's history and politics, and some would mostly say, well, actually, you're going to look at it in less detail, the history side of things, so if that's not for you, that's fine. But it can also actually, a joint honours degree or PPE can show that actually you're quite good at managing your time, so there's an advantage out of it as well. So there's a question about psychology and education or psychology and counselling. So my sort of advice to that is actually choose the course that looks more interesting. It's always my number one sort of rule. But usually education indicates usually you're interested in an education pathway. So it's teacher, childcare worker. Have a look at the course, see what it actually tells you. Counselling, once again, indicates a possible pathway, but I would still say chances are it won't have closed that many doors. So once again, nothing to worry about. Maths versus maths and statistics. I mean, statistics will usually be in a maths course anyway. So I would just say, of course, if it says with statistics, it means there'll be a more statistical focus. So that's why it's said like that. But data analysts and that sort of thing is a massively growing field. So actually, if that's your thing, then that's a really good degree to go for, because I would say that it will really improve your earning prospects. But it's also about what's most interesting. And if you're thinking, I really want to be a teacher, but actually I just want to go and study history or whatever it is, that's fine. You can do a PGCE afterwards, or teacher training program. There's a lot of those across the country. It doesn't close the door. The only courses I would say is medicine and dentistry are a lot more closed down sort of thing. So you've got to make sure that you've chosen the right A-levels, you've got the right grades, because they are massively competitive. So that's all I'd say on that one. So this is an admissions timeline for Cambridge, and I'm going to look at Oxford as well, because that might be quite helpful. So the first parts are the same. Choosing a course, once again, what you enjoy, what you find interesting, what you're good at. Choosing a college, so you can choose a specific college. So there's only one college you can choose, or it's an open application. So I really do not mind. My advice is usually, in terms of your application prospects, makes zero difference. In terms of actually your experience, I would say that, to me at least, as long as there's one option that is less preferable, then to me you always should make a choice. Even if they move you afterwards, it's still worth making that choice, because I mean, some colleges are quite far out and I didn't like that idea, but maybe that appeals to you. So that's why I think choices are important. So remember, your personal statement is the same one for all 5 universities that you submit for UCAS by the 15th of October. Now, Cambridge have a special part of the application process. It's called the Supplementary Application Questionnaire. So it's some extra information. I'll go through it in a second about a general overview of what that is. And I think you usually have to submit that within a week of your personal statement. Then they have a written assessment. They're moving more towards at-interview written assessments. But once again, check your course, first of all. And second thing is, Cambridge, unlike practically every other institution, is up to the college what admissions you use, what process they use. So it could be that one college has no assessment, another college has this assessment, and another college could have an entirely different one. So have a look. Interviews, usually the first 3 weeks of December. It's the same with Oxford. So if you are applying to Oxbridge or you know you're going to have an interview, do check when the timescale is and make sure your calendar is entirely free. Because, I mean, this year it will be online, but usually it is very much, these are the dates. If you can't attend, it is a serious problem. So make sure them times are clear, you leave it clear, you're prepared. And then by the end of January, you'll get a decision. So a lot of the information that I just spoke about is from the top link there. It is slightly different. As I said, check your courses, your SAQ. You can have a specific Cambridge personal statement if you want to. So that's useful if you're applying for a different course or you just want to provide a bit more information. And that is a document I found. It is on the Cambridge website. So have a look at that if you do want to apply there, because you'll need to be doing that in tandem while you're preparing your personal statement as well. So make sure you are prepared for that, because don't think, I'll do my personal statement, I'll submit it on the 14th of October, and the supplementary questionnaire, they'll send it through within 2 days of you submitting it usually. But don't just think, yes, I can fill this out and not have to think about it. Actually read the document. If you are going to submit a specific statement, you need to start working on that now as well. Written work, check the deadline, and if the subject even requires it, don't just think because you're doing science you're safe, because some science subjects do ask for it, because written communication is quite important, particularly when writing reports. So interviews, this is more applicable in person, so I don't know how the online system will work, but when it was in person, they usually did 2 interviews in one day at the college that you applied to, was usually the way it works. And Cambridge, compared to Oxford, interview a lot more applicants. So that's just something to think about. Oxford, as I said, was a bit different. Choose your course, choose your college. They can also have an open application in terms of colleges. They don't have an extra part. So in terms of that, by the 15th of October, so the same deadline as your UCAS, you just need to make sure you have booked yourself in for the admissions tests. The website's really easy to use for that, so just go online, look for Oxford, whatever your subject is, and it will tell you if there is a paper and how to register for that, so make sure you've done that. They do all of their tests on the same day. It's the 4th of November. This year, it's usually the first Wednesday, I think, off the top of my head, of November. So make sure you've registered for that. Then you'll need to submit your written work. So I will just point out as well, Oxford are a lot more standardized in terms of the way that they do things. So what I mean by that is your written work, it is usually every college will ask for the same amount. Just check your subject course. Same with the admissions assessment. It's the same assessment, whatever college it is. There's not that variation. And the interviews, once again, first 3 weeks of December. Oxford are more known for their residential approach. So, I mean, I stayed for 3 days when I was being interviewed. Once again, it's online this year, so don't know. And decisions should be done by the same time. So if you want to know about applying, there's a great link there. It walks you through it all step by step. So written work, the information they provide, check your requirements. I just realised I can't spell need. But if you need to do this, do check. It's about demonstrating analytical reasoning, language, writing skills. It could be used as a discussion point in interviews, so do think carefully about what you choose. Make sure you know a lot about what it is, and make sure the written work's less than 2,000 words. It's very clearly stated on their website, but you can submit an extract of a longer essay. So your EPQ, if you've had it marked, nothing wrong with submitting an extract of your EPQ. You could submit a part of your coursework. The only thing I would raise is the fact that they like to see teachers' feedback on it, and it should be uncorrected. So with mine, I tried to find the essays that I'd got 100% in. That was kind of my base mark for it. But your coursework, of course, the exam regulations mean you're not allowed to know your grade or anything. So that's where it gets a bit more tricky in terms of you can submit a piece of coursework, but you won't know the level or the quality or the feedback that's actually written on it. So that is a challenge. Interviews, As I said, usually residential, but it's online this year at the very least. I don't know how that'll be moving forwards. And Oxford are a bit more flexible, I'd say, with their interview approach, in terms that some people can be interviewed at one college, some it is part of the process you interviewed it to, some people get pulled as such, so you have to go to 3 colleges. I mean, there's some people who have had literally 8, 10 interviews. So there are advantages and disadvantages of that. Okay, so I think this is the final part. Cambridge versus Oxford. It is a hard choice to make. I was Cambridge up until July. I did Unique. I changed my mind. But this is looking online and from my experience, what's similar about them, what's different about them. So first of all, teaching similar. They use interchangeable words. So they're called a tutorial. At Oxford, it's a supervision. At Cambridge, they're the same thing. It's this one-on-one or one-on-two sort of teaching with an academic. And they'll also use seminars, which are larger discussion groups, and lab work if it's science. If you look at the statistics, Cambridge does have more state school students, but Oxford are working on that massively. And I mean, Oxford are running the Unique Summer School. They like to recruit students from that. So if you're on that, it's a big benefit there. But they are trying to make their cohort, at least I know from Oxford, they want it to be representative of the population generally in terms of the percentages. But both of them, they use your background. They do take that into account to contextualize your results. So if you got, let's just make it up and say someone got 2 9s, let's say at GCSE, and you got 2 applicants who both got 2 9s, but one was from a state school. It was the best score their school had ever got. So, a private school student had 2 9s, but they was actually only in the top 20 in their school. Then they'll look at that and actually they'll say, well, the state school people had to kind of work harder, or it was more of an achievement in the context of it. So they don't look at things like that. It's quite important. So rankings, this is the weird anomaly. Usually you find Cambridge is ranked best in the UK, but Oxford ranked best in the world. Okay, so, I mean, it's hard to separate them. They both subsidise their services, so I have found that actually for me, Oxford will always be my cheapest option. Didn't matter what university, it was always the cheapest one. Because of their generous alumni community, they can afford to do so. They both have traditions. I mean, it varies by college as to how traditional they are, so that's something to look at, consider. I mean, the college I chose, they do still say Latin at dinner. If that's not your thing, then don't choose that college. So the terms, they've got 3 sets of 8-week terms. Most universities for longer terms, so it's a bit more intense. They're sort of seen as sprints, but that's how both of them work. There are differences though. So the admissions processes are slightly different. So there are stereotypes of Cambridge as science, Oxford as humanities. But I mean, if you look at the vaccine work, for example, Oxford are quite heavily involved with that. So doesn't actually mean tons of things. Oxford are more known for debating, Cambridge for theatre, but once again, I wouldn't stick to it. As it says there, more PMs and MPs from Oxford, and Cambridge has more Nobel Prizes for science, but I wouldn't say that's a massive factor to look at. Courses, they approach things differently. So my history and politics at Cambridge, it was a more integrated approach. So all of the papers were looking at both subjects at once, whereas at Oxford, it looks at each subject individually. So I'm choosing from the history list and the politics list. And it's just if you prefer that way or not. At Oxford, everyone has to write a dissertation. They call it a thesis, which you start working your second year. You work on it over the summer and complete it by the end of third year. Whereas Cambridge, on my course, you didn't actually have to do one. You could swap it out for exams instead. And as I was saying, Oxford, your members are 2 departments, whereas at Cambridge, they try and take a bit more integrated approach. Although I found that some of the bits that I really wanted to study, as a result, got cut from my course that would have been at Cambridge. Oxford's larger, busier. That's kind of how it's seen. Cambridge is smaller and quieter. You see, people say Cambridge's reputation for nicer colleges. I think it's Oxford personally, but once again, just your preferences. They don't offer the same subjects, so that's quite important. You want to study PPE, you have to apply to Oxford if you want to go Oxbridge. If you want to study natural sciences, you have to go to Cambridge. It's as simple as that. Grades, so Oxford was 3 A's. Cambridge would have been A star AA. but they always insist on an A in history, which is understandable as I want to study history and politics. Admissions tests, as I was saying, Oxford's always had them. They've had them for years and years and years. Cambridge only did it when AS levels were abolished, but they're changed more regularly. At Cambridge, it's up to the college, whereas Oxford has a more standardised approach to make sure everyone has a similar experience. So it's really just a case of which institution you feel more at home at, really, if you're choosing between them. As I say, unique changed my perspective, but it's totally up to the individual. So to summarise very briefly, there's tons of places you can get information. Have a look on the university websites, Google searches, emailing or phoning the university, going to the virtual open days for COVID, of course, prospectuses, videos online, the videos that I've been producing. You know, you can have a look at the Facebook page I'm running, and there's tons of other organisations out there which I'm trying to spotlight, and just have a look, really. I mean, Zero Gravity, as I say, if you're eligible, it's a state school, averaging at 7s, a GCSE, and just make sure you apply and take as many opportunities as you can. So that's the end of the questions that have been submitted.